Afternoon, everybody. I'm Johnson Cox. I'm the chair of the PLA, and I want to welcome all of you here in person and all of those who are here online. I think we've got about 40 or so in the online meeting. We've got all of you. If any of you sitting further back would like to move forward, please do. And I'd ignore all these signs saying reserved on the front row because no one's sitting in them. So please feel free to get up and move forward if you'd like to, if it enables you to see better or participate better. I think what really impresses me here today is, among other things, is the diverse nature of the interests that bring you all here, whether you've joined the meeting through the online portal or joined it in person. And that's just a reminder to me of how important the Thames is, and the tidal Thames, the 95 miles where we own the riverbed and where we sort of operate on the river, how important that is to so many different interests in London and downstream of London, whether it be community use of the river, whether it be the environmental nature of the river, or whether it relates to commerce and growth on the river. And that's one of the things that makes our organisation really exciting, and it's one of the things that really is pleasing to see all those interests represented here today. So a great welcome to everybody. You have with you here too, and the main point today, we're going to tell you a little bit today about what's happening, but the main thing is to be able to take your questions. You have with us in the room all the leadership team of the PLA. You have most of the members of the non-exec members of the board, so it's a really good turnout. And please feel free to ask any of us after the meeting if we haven't answered questions during the meeting. First of all, I'm just going to give you a short overview, and then Robin will say a bit too about what's been a busy year at the port. Some of you might have noticed we have not shared yet our annual report and accounts, and I apologise for that, and it's a very simple reason. We cannot publish it until it's been laid before Parliament. That's just under our statutes. That will happen shortly and it will be published. But what we have published, and it's available, is something much simpler, much more user-friendly than 100 and something pages of an annual report, which is the PLA's year on 2 pages. And if you haven't got one, our team here have plenty of copies. So I'm going to give you just a very short overview. Or I suppose I should move the slide forward. So I just want to talk about some of the highlights of the year. And the vessel, by the way, is National Geographic vessel coming up, obviously, as you can see, through Tower Bridge. We were in 2024 the UK's biggest port by cargo. That's by measuring cargo by tonnage. We're growing. And last year we saw the opening of London Gateway Berth 4. That's 4 of about 6 berths they hope to build. And the Port of Tilbury revealing its ambitions for a 3rd terminal. And for anyone with other interests in the river, I just remind you, it is the commercial interests in the river which pay most of the costs of what we do on the river that enables everyone else to use it and benefit from it. So that is absolutely core to what we do. And the signs are good for significant growth in the years ahead. We're preparing for that. As many of you will know, we have this absolutely unique status of being a trust port, which means, and it's actually slightly more scary than it sounds, nobody owns the port. We hold it in trust for future generations, for society. And what that means is there's no one to bail us out if we get it wrong, but it also means there's no one we pay dividends to. So it's an interesting model, and it does mean that we reinvest everything that we make, and we are charged by statute with being commercial, so that we can sustain the port through thick and thin. So we have a big investment programme for our size of organisation, and one of our biggest bits of preparing for future growth is our new port control centre, which is at Gravesend. Huge investment in new technology for one of our absolutely core functions, which is ensuring safe navigation on the river. That is first and foremost our duty, to make sure that vessels safely navigate the Thames. We've also invested in a new pilot cutter with more vessels to come, and recruiting and training an increasing cohort of pilots to meet the increasing trade on the river, and it is our job to provide pilots for all vessels that need vessels coming into the Thames. So the country's growth goes hand in hand with the port's growth in many ways. The port contributes 4 billion of value added to the UK economy, so it is significant. And one of the things that it really makes the Port of London so resilient is the breadth of what we do here. The port sees, I think there's about 70 terminals on the Thames, and we bring it, well, we don't bring in, but our customers bring in fuels, very large percentage of fuels for the southeast. Building materials, probably not noticed, is how significant riverborne transport is for construction materials coming into the Thames, and of course container trade, bringing in goods into the UK, and the very diverse nature of ports of, for instance, Tilbury. So we are in the front line for growth, and growth is a big objective for our government at the moment. We're not under government control, but we wholly support the drive for growth. But it isn't just about the commercial role of the port. We have, in the last 3 years, really increased our focus on the environment, and that's both the aqueous environment, the air environment in the Thames, and on net zero. And we remain committed to what we set out in our vision nearly 3 years ago of net zero by 2040. That's 10 years ahead of government targets for net zero, and Robin will talk about the progress on that. Probably the biggest thing for the environment in the last year and it's ongoing, is the commissioning of the Thames Tideway Tunnel. Now, you've probably all heard of it. This picks up many of the combined sewer overflows, which we've read so much about, that discharge into the Thames. And it runs from Acton in West London, joins the riverbed of the Thames somewhere around Hammersmith, and it takes all those overflows all the way down to Beckton in East London, for a very large part of it running underneath the Thames. We've played an absolutely key part in that because we own the riverbed, and we've had to issue all the permits that enable the tunnel to operate, including when it will continue to discharge, which hopefully will be a very small number of occasions, and ensuring navigation is still safe when there are discharges. So very pleased with that, and we are told, and we all hope, and it's of course climate change dependent, that it will reduce discharges from combined sewer overflows. Those are like the relief valves on the sewer network. We hope it will reduce those emissions, those discharges, by 95%. But of course, we all know weather is changing, and the more intense storms may put that number a bit under challenge, but that's the ambition. And I should say that the river played a key part, because all the excavation that created the tunnel, it's a 9-metre gross diameter tunnel, 7.2 metres, so it's a huge tunnel. All the soil that was excavated, all the rock, everything went out by barge over the Thames. And think what that saved in terms of truck journeys and emissions in London. So I think the river and the port are thriving, and I should acknowledge in that the role all of you who are users of the Thames play, and all the efforts of my colleagues in the PLA who do such a great job of maintaining this organisation. I do want to, just before I hand over to Robin, focus on questions that have been raised in recent months by some stakeholders, and these were raised during the recent public inquiry into the Harbour Revision Order. This is I think, pretty modest updating of the powers of the PLA to just bring it in line, because circumstances change. It's been about 6 years in the making. And we got the legislation was 57 years old, and if you don't update things periodically, they become well out of date. But we were asked some questions about governance and accountability of the PLA, and I just want to focus on that for a moment. So as I said, we're an independent trust port. We do have an accountability to the Department for Transport, with whom we work closely. That accountability is exercised because we lay our accounts in front of Parliament, as I said earlier. I'm appointed by the Secretary of State for Transport, as are some but not all our non-executive members. We operate, there is a code call the Port's Good Governance Code. We operate wholly in line with that, and that is a very similar code in practice to any of you who operate in business will be familiar with the UK listed code, all the same principles. Our board's appointed, whether it's members appointed by the DFT or the PLA, to fulfil a skills matrix. We maintain a skills matrix because any board has to have a range of skills. Our matrix has on it about 12 different skill sets we need, and some members wholly fill one part, some have experience that contributes to a number of parts of that. But across the board, we make sure we have the skills related to community activities with experience of people to understand how important that is, our environmental responsibilities, our commercial activities, and also the usual board functions of what I call the fiduciary responsibility functions of the board to make sure that we operate safely, effectively, and profitably so we can fulfill our duties. I'm sometimes asked why we don't have individual directors representing individual constituents. And in accordance with what are well-recognised principles of corporate governance, we do not have members who specifically represent any one constituency, because the board is wholly accountable and it's important to have the breadth of experience. And you might say I would say this, but I believe we have a really good breadth of skills that's able to make the organisation effective. We do recognise the real importance with the sort of diversity that we have of making ourselves available individually and as an organisation for challenge and scrutiny at public meetings. Stakeholder events like this, some of you will have been to the individual stakeholder events we hold on the upper river, the middle river, downstream part, lower part of the river. And of course, we do many individual meetings with significant customers on the Thames and other interest groups. And we have a number of forums through which we meet, committees, and other areas of getting guidance. If anyone feels they don't get their voice heard by the PLA, if you're here today, whether it's online or in this meeting, please say so, and we will certainly address it. We do carry out an annual survey of stakeholders and what they think of our performance across a wide range of areas. Yes, I think we certainly get challenged areas from anything from navigational safety, which, as I say, is absolutely fundamental to what we do, on environmental protection, which we hugely believe in and really take responsibility. But I'm pleased to say that, in general, our stakeholders support that they think we're doing fairly well on it. But I say that with some hesitation because today's one of the key days of feedback for us. So look, I'm sure these things will come up in the Q&A session. I'm keen fairly swiftly to get to people being able to ask questions. So I just want to pause for the moment with one key message to you. The river, the port of London, the use of the river, we believe is thriving at the moment. Port trade performance, which, as I said, is fundamental to us being able to do our job, is strong. We don't take our customers for granted. Last year, our board went out and visited most of our major customers as a board, which was great. We've got more to do. We remain very focused on navigational safety with the investment that's going into our control system, very committed to net zero, and something that many of us are absolutely passionate about, which is improving the water quality of the River Thames. So I think with that, I look forward to any questions. I'm going to hand over to Robin. Sorry, Robin, I'll get out of your way.
Thanks very much, Johnson, and good afternoon from me as well. So I'm Robin Mortimer, Chief Executive at the PLA, and it's as Johnson said, it's very good to see very many of you here who have been at these meetings previously and who come to some of our other public meetings and other stakeholders who we interact with on lots of kind of day-to-day issues. Today is our opportunity to sort of set out to you how it's going, and Johnson's sort of given the big picture of that already. I'm going to run through some of our sort of performance issues over the last 12 months, and then a little bit of sort of forward look, not in a sort of regimented order. I'll be sort of moving between both what we have done and what we're planning to do looking forward on the issues that I'm going to cover. first, a sort of few numbers, just a bit of a sort of scaling of what we do. Now, in fact, in all these dimensions on this slide, the tidal Thames is the biggest, the most used waterway in the whole of the UK on every single dimension. So the river last year carried around 9 million passengers, which has obviously fell dramatically through COVID and has now bounced back again. Particularly the tourist trade, which is very good to see back on the river in strength. Almost 52 million tonnes handled in the port, so we were the biggest port in the UK again by some margin over the Humber, where I was earlier this week. They don't like us mentioning that, but I do frequently. We carried almost 3 million tonnes on the inland waterway side, so that's sort of bulk goods and materials for projects like Tideway, waste, and other sort of major bulks, and then a sort of growing number of light packages, so 42,000 parcels, but that's very much a business which we see developing more into the future. Now, of course, as well as all those commercial uses, the River Thames is extremely important from an environmental and a social point of view, and a couple of ways of sort of measuring the scale of that. 719 sporting events, and this goes up every single year, this number, and those range obviously from those sort of iconic, internationally known events through to lots of local sporting events. And over 240 river cleanup events, which again is a kind of growing activity. The river foreshore is cleaner, but we love to see people out and support them to clean up the foreshore as much as possible. So there's a sort of few numbers to scale the activity on the Thames, and then just a few numbers which kind of help to describe the PLA's performance. So obviously we measure ourselves in lots of different ways, but here are some of the headlines. One of the key things we obviously do is provide vessel traffic services, VTS services, through our port control centre. And I'm happy to say that we provided 100% service level, as I think all our users would expect, but obviously important that we always do maintain that 100% service level. Our pilotage service level is the number of ships served without any delay. So for anybody who uses any form of public transport, I think you would say 99.5% is a pretty creditable achievement. We have a goal of at least 98%, and I'm pleased that we exceeded that. And the pilotage team, led by James Stride, our Chief Harbour Master, and all the others involved in pilotage, did extremely well on that. We have also a 98% target to deal with our consent requirements, so Riverworks licence consents, dredging consents within our statutory deadlines. And again, we exceeded that target and achieved 98.9%, which again is a great achievement, primarily led by James Trimmer and his team, but with lots of others contributing in the organisation. I put the figure of foreshore permits up because I know a number of people here are particularly interested in that. This, of course, is the area which has undergone quite a lot of change, our foreshore licensing approach, and we are continuing to issue foreshore licenses as the now time-limited foreshore licenses come to an end for people, so that we maintain the throughput of people who can access the foreshore for mudlarking, as well as, of course, some who access it in a more informal way. I'm now just going to just pause and pass over to James to talk about safety for a moment, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the other dimensions. So, James, yeah.
Thank you, Robin. James Stride, the Chief Harbour Master. So just a couple of slides. So that's one of the hydrographic teams doing some survey work down by London Gateway, which is right down towards Canvey Island. I've just got one slide really to talk through. So Robin covered the complexity of the river, the volume of trade, the number of sporting events. So we're sort of really pleased with the amount of work we managed to achieve over 2024. We did unfortunately have what's classified as one serious navigation incident. This was an emergency services vessel striking a buoy at night whilst on a blue light run. No serious injuries, but we have done a full investigation with the organisations involved, and lessons have been learnt. The other thing, we've covered everything from all the trade that moves, so the ultra large container ships, 400 metres long, 24,000 containers on board, go right down to the human powered ones, so the stand up paddle boards, the rowing, or the canoes, and it's delighted that the team have managed to get with our partner agencies a new edition of the Tideway Code issued. We're required under the Port Marine Safety Code, or now the Port and Marine Facility Safety Code, to issue a 3-year marine safety plan. Last year was the first year of our new plan, which covers 24, 25 and 26. I'm pleased to report that all the objectives we set within that were achieved. One of the important things that we've done with the Thames Skills Academy and with a number of organisations on the Thames is roll out a Thames continuous professional development for the inland waterways masters and crews. All masters had to be signed up by the 1st of January last year, and last year was the first year where they had to start doing some activity, be it training courses or experiences, to start to build up their points for that. And that's been refreshed over the year with feedback from the river users and through the Thames Skill Academy. One of the things we did do at the beginning of last year to manage that complex river is to split our Harbour Masters team back into 2 teams. So one really focused upstream of London City Airport, where we've got most of the Class 5 passenger vessels, all the activity that goes through central London and right up to Teddington, with the other team really focused more on the commercial activities downriver. With, as mentioned earlier, we've got 70 terminals. That's a lot of engagement that needs to take place, awareness of where things are, the Riverworks licence statistics. So I'm really pleased that we've done that, and we've had some really good feedback from stakeholders, but I'm keen to learn anything else from there. By moving to that model, we've also managed to do some focused compliance checks on the river. So one of them is Operation CLASP, which is looking at the Class 5 passenger vessels. Now, with 9 million people going onto the Thames, we need to make sure that the vessels are operated in compliance with the regulations, and a very good set of checks have taken place so far, really high levels of compliance. Real credit to the operators out there. Slightly aside, but also impacting on some of the river users, the PLA has invested 160,000 in management of the trees further up the estuary, where right up in the river, where we own the banks. And the final thing for me before handing back to Robin is, as well as all the work we've done with the pilotage, we've got 95 miles of river to monitor, to keep an eye on all that activity that takes place 24/7. Although we do have 3 patrol boats that are out 7 days a week, we still need members of the public, operators, everyone else to report in when they've had either an incident or a navigational near miss, and that is available via the PLA website. Very quick to do, put the report in, and I can guarantee that the Harbour Masters team, the Marine Compliance team within my directorate, do go through every single one of those received, try and understand what happens and whether there's any learnings for it. That was the safety bit. I'll hand back to Robin.
Thanks, James. We very consciously do our presentations in that order, because safety is actually at the centre and first in this organisation. So that's why we always start with the safety messaging. I'm just going to run through now, and I'm going to try and do these slides. I'm not going to speak to every word on these slides because I don't want to use up the whole time for me and not give you a chance to ask questions. But we are the UK's leading port. We have a goal to be net zero by 2040. As Johnson said earlier, we are highly diversified. So this is the sort of wheel showing the cargo types that make up that 52 million tonnes. And it's broadly, the 3 biggest segments are oil products, containers and aggregate cement, which is for the building construction industry. The big change, really, the 2 big changes that are happening over the long term in that mix is that the containers part of the pie is getting bigger, because London Gateway in particular is growing as a proportion of the trade, and the oil products segment is slowly becoming less, which you would expect as we transition to net zero. And what we might see over time is alternative fuels taking up part of the mix. So we are, not as well as being the largest port, we are extremely diversified. There are obviously other large ports which are just doing containers or just doing bulk materials. We do everything. The outlook is very, very promising. London Gateway Berth 4 is now fully operational. Berth 5 is in consenting, and Berth 6 is in planning. So two thirds capacity, a third still to go. London Gateway announced before Christmas that it had won the Gemini Alliance, which is the largest single grouping of container shipping in the world, formed of two companies, Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, and we're already seeing those ships under that alliance coming into the port. That's been very, very good news commercially for them, and obviously therefore for us. Port of Tilbury is also expanding. Tilbury 3 is an application which has just been made to the local planning authority. The final project I'll just mention is Corey Environmental, who deal with London's waste through the Bexley Combined Heat and Power Plant, have a very exciting project for which they've just submitted a development consent order application to capture the carbon dioxide from that big facility, the biggest single point of CO2 inside the M25. And then the plan is to then take that out via river to storage in the North Sea. So a real opportunity for the Thames to be part of decarbonising London more broadly. What does the PLA do to support that? Well, a lot. None of that activity can actually happen on the Thames without the PLA's involvement. And some of the key things we do are clearly the VTS Centre. We're investing £9 million in the project which Jonathan mentioned earlier, which is a new operations centre which anticipates future growth. So it sort of gears us up for that growth. We are also investing in significant other capital works. Denton Development Works is essentially a new pontoon for our operational site at Denton, and we do sweat our assets because the pontoon that we are replacing was built in the last year of the First World War, and we've used it and repurposed it for over 100 years, so we thought it was time to replace it. So a new one is being built currently. We're buying some new vessels. We're continually upgrading our radars, of which we've got 17 sites along the estuary. We're always investing in pilot training. We got behind, some of you will remember, in our pilot recruitment, and we were sort of playing catch up for a few years. We won't let that happen again. We will continue to recruit pilots in anticipation for future growth. So we're getting those great performance figures that I mentioned earlier. And of course, we have a very important role as the PLA in consenting any infrastructure or any project on the river. So as well as our sort of direct service role, we have this role as a planning consenting body, which is very important. Now, the second part of our Thames vision is what we call Destination Thames. So the role the River Thames plays as a place for people to enjoy and to be active and to come on holiday, etc. Now, obviously, I had to put this picture up first because it's nice and jolly. At the wrong time of the year, I know, but I'll start with this because it's this is actually the chair of our London Pilots Committee, acting as Father Chris. I'm sorry to give that away. This was something called Santa on the Thames, which we organised last year, which is just a nice little way of sort of celebrating the role that the river, the port, plays in delivering Christmas. You know, so much of the people, the presents and the food people have at Christmas come through the port, and this was us providing a charitable project to support the Evelina Children's Hospital, and also sort of highlighting the role that Thames plays in Christmas. Now, going back up to the top of the slide, obviously we are doing some sort of longer-term strategic work around Destination Thames, particularly through what we're calling the Tidal Thames Master Plan. So this is taking every single borough along the river, which there are 23, and essentially planning for how the land and the water interact. And what we've discovered through that is that many of the local authorities are not really very focused on the river. They're focused on what happens on the land side, and so we're trying to kind of close that gap and say, what do we want the river to be used for over the long term in all those places? We also sponsor and support a lot of organisations along the river. I've mentioned here Totally Thames, who run the annual festival in September, and many other things, and operate the Thames Lens project. We've been supporting the Thames Explorer Trust since 2008, and we provide many other elements of charitable support along the river. One of the key things we've done proactively over the last couple of years is to run something called the Active Thames Fund. And this is, as it says, about the active use of blue space, with a particular focus on accessibility and inclusion. We published a report last year. It's worth having a look at to sort of see the impact of all of that funding. I won't go through all the numbers, but I think it's reading the report, it's just really striking how often quite small amounts of money can go a really long way in terms of improving people's experience and opening up opportunities for active use of the river, particularly for groups and communities who don't use the river typically as much as others. We are also finally on this element of the Thames Vision doing some work this year around how do we measure all that impact. So lots of organisations talk about community impact. It's quite hard sometimes to demonstrate the value of that, so we're going to try and do that better this year. Thirdly, I'll just come on to natural Thames. This is in fact a picture of the tunnel, the Tideway tunnel. Since it was connected, there have been no spills from it. Now, of course, many of you will notice it hasn't rained as much as normal, so that is part of the reason for that. But it is also a clear demonstration of the value of that, because it certainly has rained enough in the last 4 months for there to have been spills into the river if the tunnel wasn't in operation. So it's great to know that since February, 0 spills from the sewage system into the tidal Thames, which I don't think has had enough publicity given the high profile of that subject. We're also active with many other stakeholders in this area. We launched the Clean Thames Plan at a parliamentary launch last year, working with many, not just on the issue of sewage pollution, but also on litter and other forms of pollution. We're also planning this year to do a project to clean up the wet wipes accumulation. The Evening Standard calls it the Wet Wipe Mountain on the Hammersmith foreshore. We do have some funding for Thames Water for that. And that will be a really good milestone to see that eliminated. We also continue to operate our passive driftwood collectors along the river, which many of you will know and have seen. The tidal Thames was declared dead in 1957, and this really sort of shows how far we have come. We often, I think the environmental story is often very gloomy, isn't it? But actually, there is real progress here. 125 fish species at the last count, lots and lots of marine and terrestrial mammals, overwintering birds. Actually, the Thames environment is much better than it was 2 generations ago. We're very much involved in recording that wildlife. We're working with Zoological Society for London and others, and very keen that we receive any reports on environment or any species observations. Always keen to receive those. We're also working on the government's policy on biodiversity net gain. So this is where a development impacts nature, and there's a requirement to put back at least what's been lost plus 10%. We think there's a real opportunity there for the PLA with its ownership of the foreshore and salt flats and other places to really help to play into that market. So that's some work that we're doing on that. And finally, on the sort of net zero side, we do have a goal to be net zero by 2040, and we're a long way advanced already. We switched our fleet to HVO last year and the year before, and that resulted in an 83% reduction in carbon emissions, which is obviously a great step. The last 17% is harder to get at, but we are absolutely committed to working on that and to doing it using a science-based target approach, not sort of getting round the need to reduce emissions by nefarious sort of accounting means. One part of that this year has been vehicle fleet electrification, also looking at renewables on site and all the other things that you can do to reduce emissions. We're also working with other stakeholders on the broader decarbonisation of the Thames. We have a net zero coalition, which we work with on that. One of the key projects which we've been working on, and Grace is very keen to answer any questions on this, is called the Electric Thames Initiative. So this is really trying to understand what the electrical requirements will be for battery power of vessels along the river, and then to work out how we put the infrastructure in place to enable that transition to happen. Any questions on that, obviously, I'm very, very happy to come back to. I'm just going to finish. I've got 2 more slides, then I'm going to open up for questions. You will see in the handout some of the sort of facts and figures, which will be in more detail, obviously, in our annual report and accounts laid before Parliament. I just going to highlight really 3 points from that. The first is that our turnover continues to grow. One of the obviously the financial effect of that growth in port trade and growth in river use is that it very directly feeds through into the PLA's turnover, which grew 9.8% in 2024. So this year we will surpass the £100 million business mark. Which I think makes us into a big business rather than a medium-sized business, according to government statistics. So there we go. Very exciting fact. The second thing to say is that we do invest that. As Jonathan said, we don't have shareholders to give dividends to. We do invest that back in the river. A large part of that is investing in the things I talked about earlier, our capital investments to improve our efficiency, to improve our operational capacity and our sustainability. £10.9 million invested last year. Our operating surplus last year rose to 17.8 million. 4.4 of that was a one-off. The rest was what you might call our annual operating surplus. And of that, we're committed to giving 5 to 10% on charitable donations, sponsorship, and sort of community benefits. And I guess to sort of scale that, the best FTSE companies typically aim for about 1% of their pre-tax profits. So as a trust port, we very much provide back into the community a much larger proportion than a listed company. And finally, I can't but finish on the HRO, I think, because I know many of people here have been involved in that process. Really, I think all there is to say actually at this point is that many of you will know we've had the public inquiry. Some of you were in attendance at that, and we are still waiting for the follow-up from that. So the inspector is writing his report at the moment. As far as I'm aware, it hasn't been yet received by the MMO. The MMO gets that, not us. And then once they've considered it, then they decide whether to make our HRO, amend it, or to reject it. So there's not really much more to say on that because we don't know what the report says. But that's where we're at in terms of the process. We did, during the inquiry, have a number of wider points raised. The most frequent of those was on the issue of balconies. Which has come up in this meeting and in other meetings before. So again, I thought I'd mention it rather than waiting for your question on it. We have committed to review our approach to balcony charges. We've asked the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors to provide a surveyor to do that independently. As yet, they haven't actually managed to do that, and so we may have to, approach it differently. But we are still committed to reviewing our approach to balcony charges to find a basis on which there is more general agreement to our approach. So we are going to be doing that going forward. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I think questions now, Johnson.
Back to me. Thank you, Robin. I realise I didn't introduce our leadership team, and over the last 2 years we've had very significant rotation and change in our leadership team and added a number of members to reflect the breadth of responsibilities of the PLA. So if I just ask everyone to raise their hand. You obviously all know Robin. You've now met our new people been here a year or so, but James Stride, our new Chief Harbour Master, Steve Lockwood, new Chief Financial Officer, Grace Rawnsley, who's responsible for our Environment and Sustainability Programme, sitting in the front row, Karen, responsible for Human Relations, and James Palmer, responsible for our marine operations, and Sean sitting here, responsible for our corporate affairs. And who have I left out? I've left someone out. Oh, yes, I've left out. No. At least as well known as Robin, Jim Trimmer, whose knowledge of the river surpasses certainly most people in our organisation. Certainly the history of use of the river is, Jim could win mastermind on that. Look, time for any questions. I'm going to first of all start with taking some questions in the room, then Sian is going to relay ones that are online. And what I'm going to do, I'll come to you, is if a subject is raised, and I think there might be a number of questions on it, I'll ask if there's any other questions on that subject, so we can sort of try and get a sort of subject by subject approach if we can, just for your efficiency of dealing with as many questions as possible. So, hands up now, and I'm going to start here in the front row. Then I'm going to go to the two gentlemen at the back, and then we'll start again. So let's start here in the front. And please just say your name and your affiliation, and please help me by trying to keep comments brief if possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Deputy Marianne Fredericks. I am a councillor in the City of London for the ward of Tower. If you want to know where that is, you're sitting in it. I'm a regular river user, the Great River Race in particular, and you have a great rowing team. And hello, Grace, lovely to see you. But the reason I'm here is I'm part of an organisation called Bridgewatch, which you saw on one of the slides, and we are suicide intervention on our bridges, and we've been running now for just over 2 years. We have 40 volunteers, and we're gaining. Thank you for those who support us. And we have received funding, thank you very much, from the PLA. And Robin asked me to ask the questions that goes on record. But we'd very much like to see some further funding, perhaps on an annual basis, to support our much needed work and intervention. And I would also like to say thank you very much for your boats who come out and help us when we do have people in distress. So Robin, question to you. Can we have some assurance that the PLA will continue to sponsor us and support our work with an annual donation? And I would ask you very generously, given that you've just raised an extra £10.9 million. Thank you.
I think,
Well,
I think we're going to have a slight caution here because that might be followed by a lot of other things. But clearly what you're doing is absolutely vital, essential. We are, you know, our crews have to sometimes, as you acknowledge, help and support, and it's really distressing. And obviously it's suicides, but it's also, we've had 2 incidents this year on the river of children dying in the river, not from suicide, but going in the river. I can't tell you how distressing that is for our crews, as it is for your organisation, as it is for society. So Robin,
yeah, no, we did speak before, didn't we, Marion? And thank you for the work you do. And we are, you know, we are very supportive. And yes, the answer is that we will. Let's talk further because we very much don't want, you know, your funding gap to cause a problem. So let's talk further about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
next to you was a question, I think.
Thank you. My name is David Green. I live on the river, and the question really is to James about the rib boats. I realise these are very small boats compared to the ones you normally deal with. May not seem too important to you, but to people along the stretch on Canary Wharf, to the west side of Canary Wharf, the high-speed manoeuvring of the rib boats is causing a very significant problem. My understanding is that the PLA issues the passenger or the plans that allow those rib boats to travel at 30 knots and perform high-speed manoeuvres in that stretch of the river. There is a second stretch of the river further down, beyond the O2, which is not an issue to us. They also perform high-speed manoeuvres there, but that's not the one that we're worried about. Will the PLA consider changing the passage plans for the rib boats that are travelling on the west side of Canary Wharf so they don't cause a problem, particularly of noise, to residents living close to the river?
James, obviously one for you.
Thank you, David. Now, as we've been communicating over the last few days on this one, there's two separate parts to that. The first bit is the high-speed COCs, which the vessels get through through our review of the vessels themselves, and the second bit is the speed limits themselves and the high-speed zones. And as said to you in the emails over recent days, there's a number of vessels, including our own vessels when they're not in blue light mode, the emergency services when they're not in blue light mode, the Thames Clippers and other work boats that go up and down that stretch and are allowed up to 30 knots if they've got the high-speed COC. So that also includes the rib. So there's a wider number of vessels that do go across that area. And as you said, there are actually sort of two main areas for it. There's one up river, up above Wandsworth, and there's also the section around the Isle of Dogs. So at present, there's no plans to change the high-speed zones that we've had in place since 2012. And we know that the rib operations have been in place since 2008. So at present, there's no navigational safety reason which is our remit to do that.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? The issue is specifically about the ribs. We're not interested in any of the other boats. It's specifically about the ribs, specifically in that area.
And so what is it about the ribs? In the noise or the swash?
Both the noise and the wash, but it's only the ribs. So the rest.
Okay.
Let's dispense with that.
Can I just suggest James pick that up afterwards, if you wouldn't mind? So just so I take as many questions as I can. But James will come back to you on that, because I think you're asking for one class of vessel to be reduced in speed, and I'm sure that raises some issues for us. But we will certainly respond. Now, I said I'd go to the back of the room, then I'm going to come to this side of the room. Can I? Yes, gentleman in the pink shirt.
Thank you. Hi, Richard Drew from Hemico. We fund, develop and deliver district heating networks. So my question's about your net zero decarbonisation plans. It's a very unlikely scenario that London can decarbonise heat without water source heat pumps in the Thames. So my question is, are PLA committing to positions in policy or strategy as part of your net zero plans in this regard?
So this would be what, heat exchangers in effect in the river?
Yeah, water source heat pumps,
Water
either
source heat
on or
pumps.
by the river, drawing water out and using that
And
to
abstracting
generate heat.
small temperature gradient.
Yes, that's
See,
exactly it.
I was just going to say, any other questions on that net zero subject before I turn to Grace to answer that? I mean, it's a fascinating. You've got one on the same theme. Well, let's just take this one because it's a very specific question. I know this is happening in some other rivers around the UK. Grace, is this something we've looked at?
Yes, sorry, we have looked at this, and actually I believe there are one or two on the river already, and I think James Trimmer will be able to tell us exactly where they are. We do variously get applications from various different developers looking at this, and we basically need to assess each one as it comes, and we're very open to that. One of the challenges is where the infrastructure is very large, so sometimes the infrastructure is very large. And that causes us challenges, obviously, if it's going to move into the navigational areas or if it's going to have an impact on the riverbed itself. But the answer is we're supportive of it, but each scheme has to be judged on its own merit from an environmental perspective. Jim, did you want to say anything further?
Baynard House and Shelmex House, the two that are currently on the river, although those are individual schemes rather than more district heating, which I think we're talking about here. And as you know, we have talked about these. We've also worked with the GLA and the Environment Agency on a set of principles for these heating approaches, because the parameters are much the same wherever they're put. Hello.
I think we could all hear Jim.
I was going to say, the parameters are much the same wherever they're put, and what we want to do is to have some principles rather than every scheme asking the same question again. So, yes, we support, but they have to be in the right location to ensure they can fit in with everything else in terms of depth of water and the size of the infrastructure where it is.
So I hope that's that's as positive answers I think we can give and very helpful. Let me take the other net zero questions over there, and then there was one more at the back. No, then I'll come to this gentleman here. And some online. Sir.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ralph Hardwick. I've been pretty active over the last few years.
Certainly recognise you from previous
vessel
meetings.
emissions. Clearly, at the recent public inquiry, it cropped up that not only the IMO emissions legislation was being used on the Thames, but also MGN 646. The PLA licensed about 600 vessels on the Thames. How many of those do not comply with either of those two emissions requirements? And what progress will be made or task will there be to actually take those non-compliant vessels through to net zero?
Question, I certainly can't answer that, I'm afraid. Grace, can you answer that?
I couldn't
James?
answer that with, not at this particular
Ralph, we will
moment.
come
could
back to you on that. It's an
yeah.
interesting question. I will come back to you in a moment. So the gentleman here has been very keen to, and then I have promised I'll take some online questions. So.
Thank you. Polivius Poliviu, I'm the Transfer Program Director for Business London. So my question it was prompted. I saw one of the slides with Santa there, so it reminded me of spending review yesterday. Not, not so. You know, it might have been seen as an auditor in London, but it's on the announcement and obviously including increased funding for the DBT. So the question is very much about. Obviously, it doesn't mention ports and trade or rivers explicitly.
Thankfully, we're not subject to the comprehensive spending review, which we should all thank goodness, because we
Absolutely.
wouldn't be able to put what we do into the river if we were subject to the
Absolutely,
spending review.
but given the importance, obviously, of ports in trade, global connectivity, and industrial strategy, I'd be keen to hear any views on that or any reflections.
Robin, I think that's one
yeah,
for you.
I think so. It's a really interesting question. In fact, yesterday we had a meeting of what's called the UK Major Ports Group, which we're part of, and we were looking obviously at the spending review. The infrastructure plan that's following, I think, will be probably more, obviously indirectly relevant, and certainly, it's very welcome to see a significant investment in surface transport infrastructure. Obviously, we've got the Lower Thames crossing just announced, which will be very beneficial for port trade on the East Coast. There's some very welcome investment in some of the pinch points on the rail freight network, which will particularly help decarbonise freight onward distribution. So I think that capital investment side of it will be very positive. As Don said, we're not funded directly from the government, so we're not going to get. It doesn't affect us in that way. I think the second area which we were particularly interested in is the attempts to improve the regulatory system, so to deal with some of the sort of delays in decision making that are caused by the regulators, particularly some of our environmental colleagues who I used to work in DEFRA, some people know, so I'm not going to be in any way negative about environmental colleagues, but that there certainly is criticism at times about the speed of decision making, isn't there? As indeed there can be about the PLA, let's face it. So we need to make sure that we've got good processes across all regulators to make decisions in a timely way, and I think that's something which we very much welcome from yesterday as well.
Thanks, Robin. Sean, let me just see if there's some questions from people who are listening online.
Yes, we've got.
And if there's a couple on the same theme, please group them.
So we've got a couple on net zero and climate change. So one from Keith Johnston from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, saying that the PLA is a leader in port decarbonisation, but how are we sharing our approaches with other UK and international ports, and how should government be working with you best to promote shipping and port decarbonisation with industry and speed up the transition? So that's one. And the second one is from, we've got more questions in, from Councillor Paul White, who's a Wandsworth Cabinet member for the Environment. And he is interested in our decarbonisation programme, and congratulations on that. Wonders if we've been able to use the river in conjunction with local authorities based on the river to bring forward a water source heat pump project. So I know we've touched on that already, but renewable heating would be of great interest.
Okay, so I think on the sharing of practice, thank you MCA for recognising the what we do. I think the simple answer to that is yes. Robin has mentioned the Major Ports Group through which we work. We host an extraordinary number of visits from other ports, and on a much lesser scale, our people visit other ports to share approaches. And we're particularly interested at the moment in links with other ports that share this extraordinary sort of combination of community, environment and commerce which characterise the Thames. But we're very open to sharing. Does anyone on the panel, do we need to add anything to that? I think
that covers it.
the answer is we host a lot of visits, and we're also equally keen to learn. On the question about the district heating I think we've probably answered that. Very keen to promote it. We haven't yet done anything with Wandsworth or any other councils. I would say, by the way, it's an opportunity to mention that one of the things we've pioneered in the last few years, and credit for the work done on this to Jim, has been to really develop our master plan for the river. As Robin mentioned, I think if you're, please, I'm not trying to criticise local authorities in any way, but if you're a local authority, you could be looking more at the land side. Our interest is the river side and making sure that anything that uses the river frontage is something that supports a long-term use of the river. And to make sure we work well with local authorities, we've developed a master plan. Jim, how many have we now completed of the boroughs, and how many have we got to go?
8 so far, with we're doing another 5 this year, so we'll be up to 13, and we've got 10 left, and then we'll start again.
And these are really important ways of just building our working with local authorities so that we really are joined up and we make sure that the best use for the public interest is made of river frontage, whether it's for commerce, whether it's for environmental reasons, whether it's for community reasons. And Jim leads that work. Okay, let me come back to the room, then I'll come back to you. So, oh my goodness, right, where do we start? I'm going to take the gentleman over there who's currently got his hand up because he's had it up. No, it's you, sir. Yes. Then I'll come over here.
I'm Richard Westover from the Sailing Club in Putney.
Sorry, you're from the Sailing Club, yes.
Yeah, that's right. We're thrilled about the opening of the Tideway Tunnel and the prospect of a clean Thames and increased recreational use of the river. We're in the early stages of planning a race to highlight this event. We're hoping to sail a bit further down the river to the Houses of Parliament and back, which we think will be a spectacular backdrop to suitably celebrate this occasion. We're aware that there are safety issues involved and that other stakeholders are affected. So I'd just like to ask for your help in navigating those issues and hopefully...
Simple answer, sir. And we did have a chat beforehand along with Robin. Answer is yes. Absolutely wonderful idea to celebrate the opening of Tideway with the sailing race on the river. Can't commit whether it can come as far as Westminster. James will pick that up. Yep. And we'll do everything we can to help. As we do, I think, you saw this extraordinary number of community events that happen on the river. We really, really, really get excited by community events on the river. So anything we can do to help will be great.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Yes, thank you. My name is Oliver Brown. I work for Brett Group. We import essential construction materials into the Thames and we move them along the Thames. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Jim and Robin and the PLA team on the sterling work that the PLA have been doing on Robin's Wharf. This is a wharf that is in active use for construction materials where an inappropriate development has sought to extinguish the use of an active wharf. And I'd also like to praise the master planning work that's being led by Jim. But clearly there's a disconnect here. If we're trying to achieve net zero and more sustainable transport and deliver essential development, river frontage sites are key, but they're still being lost to non-river uses. So what more needs to be done to bring safeguarded wharves into use and to protect the existing wharves?
So I think I can answer that one because you see that clearly aggregates are, we know how important they are to the commerce on the river, and it's been really encouraging, by the way, to see, the first half of last year was a downturn in aggregates, and that was construction in London, so really good to see how it's picked up again, and very, very well aware of Robin's and the issues in Gravesham on that wharf, and I think you probably agree, I think you were acknowledging, we have really lent into that to make... Sorry, I'm leaning. Sorry about that. I think you've seen how much we've lent in to trying to protect that wharf. We're wholly with you on that, and we will continue to do so. We thankfully have this regime of protected wharfs. We're really keen to promote that because aggregates will come in for construction. We've got big infrastructure spend in this part of the world, and clearly we need aggregates for that, and we will support it. And I know how many dredgings come into your site. In fact, I've both been in and out on a dredging ship coming to you. So yes, absolutely, we'll do whatever else we can to support the business in the Thames. That's our livelihood, as it is yours. Right, lady here. Sorry, just conscious.
Hi, I'm Michelle Loverick from the River Residents Group. So the River Ouse in Sussex has now got legal personhood.
Legal?
Personhood.
Personhood?
Legal
That's a
personhood.
new phrase. I'm tempted to ask how many in the room have heard of a river having personhood, but anyway, right.
It's a quite well-known concept. We'd like to know if the PLA would support the Thames having legal personhood and other rights of nature?
Fascinating question. I should have just asked if anyone else got a question on the same subject. I don't know if we're qualified to answer that today.
Well, let me just say, I mean, I think there's a book out at the moment, isn't it, by Robert McFarlane, which I was looking at the other day, actually. So I don't know. I think, in all honesty, I think we would probably take our lead from government on this, actually, because we're a sort of creature of statute. We work under government guidance, and I think that it would be logical, I think, for us to adopt whatever approach the UK adopts to that because it's sort of a legal issue. Would be my sort of instinct. I don't think we've sort of consulted or discussed this, but that would be my instinct. But I do understand where that perspective is coming from. But I think we'd probably need to sort of do what the UK approach is.
But I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Robin, that regardless of what position we take on personhood of the river, are interested in improving the river, which I think is behind this sort of concept that you're talking about. Absolutely, I hope you will see the changes we've made in the last few years on that. Sorry, we can't answer that more specifically. Grace, have any more online I should take? Because
yes, we've got quite a few coming in online.
Goodness me, right.
See on here. So a few questions around, first off, actually, Diana Roth's been waiting the longest. She asked, she was asking around safety and appreciates the work being done around access on steps and stairs in the Upper District, but says they're still asking for chains and ropes to be installed to help people get out of the river. Any progress on that, please?
Okay, any other safety questions while we're about it?
No safety ones, but I've got a lot more to come back to.
Okay, fine. Any other safety questions about the sort of river assets? Let's take this one too, because then I will get James's help on that.
Peter Finch, River Thames Society. Just to really follow on from Diana's question, in 1995 the PLA produced a comprehensive report about steps and stairs and landing places on the river. The Society followed that survey up 10 years later, and we kind of looked at the deterioration in some cases, in many cases unfortunately, of the stairs. Now, it is, if you look at many of the stairs, particularly in central London, historic stairs, and particularly with the concentration now on the interest in going on the foreshore, they also, the steps serve as a safety valve as well, not only for people on the foreshore, but anybody who's rowing or paddleboarding or even other vessels. It's a means of exit. My question really is, many of the stairs are in bad condition, and not only the bit on the shore, which I acknowledge is probably the local authorities' responsibility, but particularly the sections up to mean high water level. Can you tell me if if the PLA is intending to do something about that? Thank you.
So it's actually a very current and frequent discussion for us about access points onto the river and condition. Jim, I think you look like you're able to give an answer to that.
It's me again. In relation to Diana's question, of course, that was asked at the upper public meeting, and I think that's been trialled. In relation to the wider issue of access points, yes, it's something that we're looking again. Peter, I'm aware of that work and obviously was involved at the fag end of the 95 work. We are looking at access points again in terms of condition and use. That will be the easy part. The question then is in terms of rights, responsibilities and what happens, and that will be a further element of work, but the headline is yes, we are looking at them again.
Yes, and let's not get into the whole complicated issue of who has what rights, responsibilities, but we are supportive of improving access points. Right, Sian, a few more from you, and if you can group them, that's great.
I'll do my best. So we've got a couple of questions around mudlarking and foreshore permits. One from Liz Anderson, who's a member of the Thames Mudlark Collective, and one from Candice as well. So Candice is asking, with a 1-year permit fee of £35 times 4,000 standard permits, does the PLA have plans to use this money to hire a senior staff member to manage all aspects of mudlarking? And then the other question is around Thank you for agreeing, Jim. Thank you for agreeing to a limited number of annual renewals of standard mudlarking permits. Some of their members who have artefacts in the Secrets of the Thames exhibition have had their applications for renewal turned down. So we'd like some more information on that, please, Jim.
Okay, so first, dedicated staff, is that about processing these and taking?
I think to be fair, at the moment dealing with mudlarks is principally me, Pip, who's the head of statutory consents, and we've got one other person. I spend, to be honest, a fair amount of time dealing with foreshore issues. So in terms of what we get paid and what we spend out, it's probably, you know,
How many permits a year is it?
Well, there's 4,000 that is the number of standard permits, but because we're now limiting them, you know, there's a 1 year now on the churn. We're issuing about a couple of hundred every year.
So a couple of hundred times 35 is not going to pay for a staff member.
And to be fair, you know, there is a lot of work around, you know, liaison with a number of people, and this is particularly, I think, goes to the second question, which is that there was issues raised with us both about creative use of items from the foreshore, so we've set up a new permit category for that, and also there were concerns from people who felt or believed that the intrinsic knowledge of those who mudlark would be lost on the basis that we had 1 year permits. So, and because there was such a waiting list that it would take a long time to start again. So following discussions, we've set up a new category where people have an annual foreshore permit, but it can be renewed, and there's a number of categories. And the question then is from some people who have applied, have not got one of the three criteria we say, and they believe that we are being unfair. And the question, it's a long question, underpinning it is, will Robin basically look at them again in terms of the decision we've made? We've issued 37 permits, and the answer to that is he has agreed yes. From the decisions that I've made, Robin will review those. So the answer for Liz's question in a very long roundabout way is yes.
Fine, thank you. Right, let's move on. Sean, one more set from you, and then I'm going back to the room.
So I will bunch a question then from Diana Roth, and forgive me, I can't find the name, basically asking around wet wipes, and people are glad to hear that we're going to be addressing the wet wipe mountain, but do we have any timings for that, and is Thames 21 involved?
And Grace, timing on it? I mean, look, I just want to say, these sort of Hills of Putney wet wipes, from Putney to Hammersmith, they are not the PLA responsibility. The PLA did not put them there on our foreshore, but we are leaning in to get this cleaned up. That's a passion that we have in the PLA to do it. I'm pleased to hear a commitment from Thames Water and others to help fund it. There's a lot of work to do, and it's not easy to work out how to safely, this may sound extraordinary, how to remove these wet wipe mounds. But Grace, you've done a lot of work on it. Have we got a timescale?
I won't go into the complexities of actually removing these from the river, but it is a really complex project. We're hoping it's going to be this autumn, is our timeline that we're working to at the moment. And we're working with a number of partners, including Thames 21. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge Thames 21's role in this, in that a group of incredibly dedicated volunteers have gone out twice a year and counted the wet wipes on the foreshore in this particular location. And that richness of information and evidence has really allowed us to act on the problem, because we really understand the scale of the problem. So we're working very closely with them on the remediation work that we would like to do there and their involvement in that. So yes, I think it's an important opportunity to highlight the work of those volunteers.
So let's hope this time next year we can really celebrate having done that, because we all want to see that happen. Right. One more from you, okay?
A question from Conrad Broadley, living in North Kent. He has a vintage 1955 ski boat that he'd very much like to launch on the Thames. Question is, where could he find a public slipway on the Thames where he could do that?
I think that might be something we need to perhaps just do by email, if we could, with Conrad.
We can direct you, Conrad, to some of the maps on our website.
James will make sure someone responds to him.
And we met with Conrad end of last month as well, just to have a look at it. And it's part of considerations of facilities and stuff like that. But there's information on our website of where slipways are and launches. So that's the first part. And there's a downloadable new guide that's been launched.
Thank you. Let's come back to the room. Right, now, who has had their hand up for a while? I'm just going to see if there's anyone I haven't taken. No, I think, sir, I'll take you here, and then I'll go to the lady over there, and then I'll come to the back of the room.
Thank you, Alexander Campbell, QSR. We look after the welfare of merchant seafarers coming into Tilbury. And my questions really, it was great to see children in some of your slides. And my question is I'm sure the PLA are doing things to speak to children, to younger people. Again, they're maybe not current stakeholders, but it would be really good to know what you're doing. And the question is really, are you doing enough? Because these are your future stakeholders and the future river users. So just, are you doing enough? Could you do more?
I think there's a very simple answer to that, so which is we could always do more. It's very much on our mind at the moment. It's on our mind for two reasons. One is the staggering number of Londoners who do not have awareness of the river, of the maritime industry, of what the river brings. And the second one, which is tragically on our mind, is people who go into the river inappropriately. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had 2 deaths, not from PLA facilities, but people who've gone in the river. So, Robin, do you want to just quickly say what we're going to do, or do you want Sian to take it?
Yeah, Alex, we do, obviously, we work through organisations like the Thames Explorer Trust at the moment, particularly, and Totally Thames, and there's the funding through the sports club is another sort of way that we support young people on the river. But I think just picking up that point, we are, I can't sort of tell you how we feel it, when we see and hear of, people drowning in the river. And we've had 2 children in the space of 6 weeks in different locations, and I think it's sort of highlighting for us that there's an education thing, because whatever many of the access points are always going to be accessible to the public. Then it's not physically possible to constrain them, even with good signage, which we have. They won't always be noticed. So I think it does come down to education, and Sian and I are sort of looking at the moment about how we can do some pretty active work before the summer holidays, actually, to get some messaging out on social media and maybe through local radio to highlight the risks. But longer term, actually, how do we get into most of the schools up and down the river to provide much better education about the risks of safety on the tidal Thames, and maybe at the same time some of the more positive things about what the tidal Thames is for as well. But that key message around safety, we just need to get out there more, because it's clearly not for everybody at the moment.
And on the positive side, as Robin said, what we're doing to support community groups who use the river in all aspects. And I was really pleased. About a year ago, I was out with, I think it was the former Secretary of State for Transport, meeting apprentices on the river. And what was fantastic, and credit to all river commercial organisations for this. What was great was to see the diversity of people coming into apprenticeships in the river, people who might not have previously considered a marine career. So that was fantastic. So I hope, yes, we can always do more, and we will. Can I take the question over here?
I'm Kit Chan. I'm part of the River Residents Group. I have one question to ask. The Thames Vision 2050 is designed to make the Thames better for wildlife and for us human beings. And I know that the PLA has done a lot of work to try and improve it, but I cannot see in 25 years' time, if I'm still here, that you would achieve your goal, because there are certain things you have no control over. You are not responsible for pollution, sewage, noise, anything that the environmental agency is, or somebody else is, or the local council. So how are you going to get there between now and 2050 to have your 2050 vision?
I think
it's a tall order. No?
Well, it is a tall order. You're absolutely right. And of course, one of the, as you correctly point out, the PLA doesn't control all these things. What we do have is a convening power on the river. And that's what we try and use absolutely to the max, to bring the parties together who can have an impact on all of that. And I can't tell you all the steps to 2050, and I don't think Robin can either. What I can point to in the last few years is the progress that's been made, and we've alluded to some of it, in getting those parties to change their practices. And as with all 25-year plans, there's got to be an aspiration in it. If we could map out the exact path to get there, it would be fantastic, but then it probably wouldn't be ambitious enough. So we don't apologise for that, it's aspirational, and we will go on working with, cajoling, recognising all efforts to do it. But Robin, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just say, I mean, I am actually quite optimistic. I mean, I think if you take the cleaning of the river, I mean, the river this year is going to be way cleaner than it has been for the last, 100, 200 years, because not only have we had all that improvement that I mentioned earlier, but we've now got Tideway open, operational, and that will help. Now, obviously, there's a long way to go on all the other sewage discharge points, and it's going to take years and years of investment. But certainly by 2050, there's no reason why that investment won't have achieved an elimination of sewage into the river. And obviously, we want it to be well before 2050, and we're pushing the water companies to go further and faster. But yes, it's not going to happen as quickly as we'd all like, I think, in some cases. But I do think that we can be pretty optimistic about the longer term.
I think it's the sewage as well, the noise, and all the other nuisances
Yes.
on the river that nobody's taking responsibility for.
Well, but it's absolutely fair point. But some of the things we could do, I mean, we haven't in this mentioned GD10, which is our requirement on vessels to stop discharging sewage in the river. It's a small component of the pollution compared to what comes from sewers, from combined sewer overflows. But one step, and I think we're making very good progress on that. There are 118 combined sewer overflow points on the tidal Thames, of which just over half belong to Thames Water. Do you know offhand how many of those are picked up by Tideway, Grace? I don't know.
I don't know the number. I can find out.
Yeah.
I don't know the number offhand.
But
There's somebody in there.
so significant progress there. We're making a lot of progress downstream in the river with both Anglian and Southern Water. So we will carry on, but I can't give you an exact roadmap for it. But as Robin says, we're feeling positive but not overconfident. Now, some more questions. I will try. What I'm going to do is take questions up to about 4 o'clock, and then I think it's probably respectful to the audience for those who want to go that we break. But we will be here and we'll be around to take any further questions. So I'll pack in as many as I can. Right, I'm getting a signal to take one at the back here from my colleagues, and then I'll come over here and then come here. And I won't forget Sean. Right, let's try and do all that at some speed. Right.
My name is Paul Hyman, and I'm from In the Drink CIC. First of all, congratulations to the PLA for funding Tidefest this year. It's a long-standing community event that was sponsored by Thames Water, and surprise, surprise, it isn't now. So that's keeping a really good event.
Very glad we stepped into the breach. Thank you for the acknowledgement.
All about safety and safety and the environment on the Thames. But my question is, I note you do 245 or support for 245 cleanups on the river, and the fantastic work with wet wipes that's being supported. Are there any other initiatives that you could tell us about to reduce plastic pollution in the river that you're supporting or involved in?
Well, I guess some of our collection barges, pick up plastics. Grace, quick answer to that, please.
A quick answer to that is absolutely. There are a number. So as Johnson mentioned, our passage recollector network, for example, and we're hoping to potentially expand that in the future. We're also we're working with UCL on a project looking at microplastic filtration in the river, and looking at some potentially deployable kits that could go out into the river and filter some of the microplastics from the river. So we're taking an innovative approach, as you well know, Paul, because you work in this space. Keeping plastic out of the river is the first step to cleaning up the river from a plastic perspective, and that's why campaigns like yours are so valuable and why we're really happy to support them.
And I think a lot of this derives from things like litter bins that overflow, doesn't
Absolutely.
it, and blow into the river. And you get our support. We don't control those, but you got our full support on those. Let me move on quickly. Take the question over there, then Sean, then here. Do keep raising your hand if I've missed you.
Yes, my question is going to be about governance and accountability, which you touched on in your...
Sorry, you haven't introduced yourself, sir.
No, I'll introduce myself. My name's Nick Lacey. I've been a River resident, gosh, since the mid-1970s, so some 50 years. And since the early 1980s, I've been responsible for Downings Road moorings in the upper pool, the Tower Bridge moorings, that is to say. My question follows from what you were saying. When the PLA was set up in 1908, against considerable opposition, it may be said, because there was a lot of nervousness about having so much power within one single organization. The composition of the board, the leadership, was 100% accountable, in that every board member was either a nomination from one of the interested parties, such as the LCC, the London County Council, now the GLA, or democratically elected by the stakeholders of the river, owners of craft, etc. Now, over the 100-odd years since then, that degree of accountability has gradually been eroded until now, with the honourable exception of yourself, sir, and one other board member who are appointed by the DFT, the board is 100% self-elected. Now, in the words of one of the witnesses at the recent public inquiry, this is more to be associated with Uzbekistan than modern contemporary Britain.
Can I pause you there? Because I've got the question. I think your question is...
What are you going to do about it?
So, since 1908, or the year in which it was created, the world of corporate governance has moved on very significantly. And I think it's become recognised when you create an organisation that is self-standing and has to earn its living. You know, the PLA has to earn its living. And I can't emphasise enough the responsibility that if we don't do that, then we can't fulfil our duties. And none of the nice things we talk about would happen. Now, that sort of commercial organisation these days is not associated with boards where you have nominees of organisations. And just to pick you up on a small point, it's about half the board that are nominated by the DFT. But but the process...
Sorry, just as a point of information, currently, I understand, only yourself and one other board member.
Two others at the moment.
Two others, I apologise.
And I think there's one more vacancy. But I wouldn't want you to think that, to coin a phrase, this was a sort of old boys club of who we nominate. It doesn't really matter, the process, whether it's run by, whether it's ultimately a DFT decision or a PLA decision. It's a rigorous selection process. It isn't like we phone up our chums and say, would you like to join this board? Absolutely not. We have an independent process. We advertise it. We set out for each board position what skill set and experience we're looking for. And those of you who've worked on boards will recognise it's not just about individual skill sets. It's about building a board that is overall representative, is diverse, and diverse in every sense, from thought, ethnicity, location, etc. And it's a very rigorous process we go through. So we get in independent firms to help us do that. We open it up to anyone who wants to apply. And you know, I would say to you, actually, we got some very high quality people from that. So I'm not sure that if you went back to the world of organisations nominating people, you'd be any better off. But we may differ in view on that.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, it would be interesting to canvass the views in this room, because this is a room of stakeholders of the Thames. I think that if the greater part of the board, as it was in 1908, were democratically elected by the stakeholders of the Thames, then I think the composition of the board would be very different from what it is now.
Okay.
Now, whether it would be more or less efficient, that's a completely different issue. But I think it would be different.
Can I just add a couple?
Yeah, Robin.
Well, I think one thing to say is that I think the characterisation of the position between 1908 and 1968, I'm going to be a bit arcane here, is not accurate, because it wasn't in any sense a democratic process between 1908 and 1968. There may well have been members of organisations who were put onto the board, but what the 1968 Act did was to introduce this skill-based approach with a certain number of appointments made by the Secretary of State and a certain number made by the PLA, And that system has been in place now, for the last 57 years, and does sort of reflect, I guess, late 20th century approach as opposed to the 19th century approach that was originally set up. So I think that was a sort of slightly misleading characterisation, if I may say, Nick.
And we should mention, of course, the Port's Good Governance Code, which is the code which we comply with, which dictates how we appoint members to the board, what the board's functions are. And I think if I go on, I might sound defensive, and I don't want to. I spend my life chairing boards and building boards, and all I can say is we go to great lengths to include all skills that we need on the board, and that includes people with experience of community organisations, community interests, environmental interests, business interests, and that diversity, together with diversity and characteristics of members, is hugely important to us. I think we can pick that up outside if the room later over a cup of tea if you'd like to go further on that. Sian, I'm coming back to you.
So a couple of final questions from online. A very quick one from Anne Willard-Sullivan around the removal of wet wipes at Hammersmith. Just how confident are we this is going to happen in the autumn?
We're going to make this happen. I can't promise it's the autumn, can I, Grace? But we're going to make this happen.
So we're going to make that one happen.
Is that fair, Grace? I'm landing you with the commitment.
Yes, I'm not going to hold myself to. Well, the autumn is what we're aiming for, but there are other factors outside of our control on that one. Yeah.
Regulatory consent.
So there's a lot of regulatory consents that we need to go through.
Let's
you think
not
you
go.
just get a shovel?
You can hear our determination to do it, but there's things we've got to manage.
Thank you. And a final question from Diana Roth around the repairs to the Kew Embankment towpath. Appreciates their responsibility at the Borough of Richmond, but how are they progressing? And have we had to issue any works licenses? She's sure that we've been watching the process. I know you've been watching it, Jim.
Jim, brief answer from you, please, to that.
Yes, we have issued permits. The scheme is using the river from Isleworth Drawdock, and I've been asked that the scheme will due to be or the towpath will reopen mid-August, and the scheme will end at the end of August. But I will send Diana a full update.
Thank you. You want to sneak in one more?
I'm going to sneak in a bit of follow-up to Alex's question from a few questions ago around engaging young people.
Around young people, yes.
So
well, I think that's important.
Through the HR team, we have a great outreach programme. So Karen's team runs that, so engaging with schools all over London, Kent and Essex. So if you know of any schools that would like to hear from us, please do get in touch. And we're actually running right now a competition with the Royal Museum to Greenwich aimed at 11 to 18-year-olds, asking them to design a vessel of the future. So we're really conscious our 2050 vision, that's 25 years away. It's going to be the people who are in school and college and just entering the workforce right now who are going to be key to delivering that. So how can we engage with them? So I'll be able to share more information with you and with everyone else.
I think you better have a discussion.
Can I just say, personally in my organisation, if we can help in any way going into schools, we make that offer. We need to get to our young people.
Yes. And I can tell you, Robin and I spent an hour discussing this on Monday as to how we get our people, and that could include your people, doing that directly. Right, okay. Right, I'm going to propose taking two more questions, and then, look, we will stay around, but I'm conscious of the time of the audience. So there's a lady here, and there's a lady at the back, and...
Hi, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. My name is Teresa. I'm from Amazon Web Services, so the technology arm of Amazon. And listening to the presentation is fascinating. Hearing all this great work that's been done and that is ongoing is amazing. So I can see that there's two core messages from it, like the first pillar focusing on safety, correct me if I'm wrong. Second one looking at sustainability, net zero by 2040. So the question here is kind of just, in general, think big question. How does technology and kind of digital tools play into kind of accelerating these goals that you have and these KPIs you want to achieve? Thank you.
Huge part, and of course, our big technology investment at the moment is what we're doing to change our navigation systems on the Thames, really core to our job, both to safety and to efficiency of the job. And we spent an interesting amount of time over the last 2 years discussing the role of innovation and technology. I'm not sure which of my colleagues to actually ask if they want to contribute to it.
Shall I have a crack? I mean, I think it's going to be fundamental, isn't it, to all of those things. I mean, on the safety side, you know, our new system, which we're just installing at the moment, I think it's just gone live, in fact, in the last 48 hours, is, you know, every iteration of navigation technology offers an improvement. So, and we'll obviously continue that. I think on the sustainability side, you know, there needs to be some big step changes, doesn't there, in terms of alternative fuels for the maritime environment, and particularly when we think about hydrogen. I mean, there isn't yet at scale the ability to purchase hydrogen-based vessels for most purposes. So we're going to have to see a huge amount of innovation to enable hydrogen in all its different forms to be both manufactured in a green way and then to be deployed in a marine environment. So we will play a very small part in that, because obviously it's big R&D bodies and national government which will do most of the heavy lifting on that, but we certainly have a role as demonstrator and a supporter in that, and we're very keen to support in that.
And in fact, one of the things that triggered our whole master planning approach was a thinking there's going to need to be sites for hydrogen along the river. Better think about that now, because you may need safety curtilage around such plants. A technology point we haven't mentioned, which if anyone in the room or online can help us with, is we're really interested in how to apply technology to measuring water quality. And Grace's team are doing work. We are hoping to engage some water companies in supporting measuring in situ. But let's pick that up outside the room. If you've got any ideas of how you can help us on that, Teresa, we would really welcome it, because it's a really big profile one, and it's one we're prepared to really lean into. I said I'd take the last question at the back there. So I'm sorry if I've missed you out, whoever it was here.
Hello, Sheila Keeble from the Greenwich Society. This isn't a Greenwich question. Many people in the room will be familiar with the Richard Montgomery, a armament ship from the Second World War, stuck on a sandbank in the mouth of the Medway and the Thames estuary. Looking at your very ambitious plans to increase commercial shipping, particularly into London Gateway and cruise ships, which you know we detest more than anything in Greenwich, do you have any sort of plans or strategies, and do you work with the Ministry of Defence to alleviate the possible blowing up of the whole of North Kent if some out of control ship should happen to hit this unfortunate vessel?
Yes, understand the question. James is the person to answer.
Well, I was just going to say, we were hoping it was going to be a finance question for Steve, who's been on this panel and not. But I think you don't really want to take that one, do you?
I did say no, but
yeah,
you did.
Actually, the Montgomery isn't actually within PLA jurisdiction. I did double check that before I became the Chief Harbour Master. It sits just on the entrance to the Medway. It's well outside the navigation channel, but I know that our team liaise quite closely, regularly with the teams that are responsible for it, and our VTS service does provide with the Medway overview.
So it's the responsibility of the Medway, is it?
It's within the Medway. It's within the
I think
Medway
I saw there was someone from Peel Ports here. Maybe they're very welcome here, but if they wish to answer it, feel free to do so. But I absolutely understand the concern about the Montgomery. It's now, I've just been reminded that my colleague Steve has not had a question yet, nor has my colleague James Palmer. So if there's any last question that is related to finance or to our marine operations, I'm happy to give them both a shout. Otherwise, guys, you got off lightly. So I think that's a good moment to draw a close. As I say, we will all be around. Is there tea and coffee? Tea and coffee outside. We're around if any of you have questions. Almost our whole board is here. If anyone wants to understand more and test what I said about our board with any of my colleagues, please feel free to do so. So thank you all very much for attending. It is really important to us, this. I think where I'm standing, I can count the number of PLA people here in the room, and there's a big turnout of many of my colleagues. So, and I thank them all for attending. I thank you all for attending. I thank those who've joined us. 41, I think, was the number I saw. Oh, one was Sean, so it's 40 online. Thank you to everybody. And look, do reach out in other ways. You know who we are. You know how to reach us. We aspire to taking very seriously our engagement with all of those who use the river and this great tidal Thames that serves so many people. Thank you.